Well, hello, guys. Good evening. Welcome back to the Friend in the Room podcast. I am your host, Keziah, and this is episode 2. Welcome. Long time no talk. I mean, that's a lie. That's literally, I'm lying off the bat. Okay. Last time I spoke to you guys was less than a week ago, but I'm just itching to be behind this mic nowadays since I was restricted for so long. I think I mentioned it in the last video. I had zero phone storage, so even if I wanted to record and I was ready to record, I couldn't, guys. I couldn't even take pictures at concerts. I was actually in the trenches, but we're back. We're back, as you guys know. And I have a really interesting topic I want to discuss with you guys today. But as usual, let me put my mic down because I want to move my hands. And also, it seems as though there's actually more dust on my mic this time around than there was last episode. And I am unaware of its origin, but I'm deeply concerned because it must mean there's some dust gathering in my room. And now I don't think I'll be able to sleep at night until I rectify the situation. So let's record this so that I can go find this dust. Okay, one sec. I'm actually finding it a little bit harder to record today because, again, hypocritical. I'm coming to this episode with my journal. Oh, damn, how dare she? How dare she? I know I said in the last episode that I was going to try and come at you guys off the dome, but I did also, technically, I didn't lie. I did disclaim that I would need my journal, and this is one of those instances that I need my journal. Let me break down the title of today's podcast episode, and that is Religious Psychosis and the Origin of its Stigma. When you hear religious psychosis, when you hear of that term, what do you see? What do you envision? And how would you illustrate somebody who is undergoing religious psychosis or is a victim of religious psychosis? What comes to mind? Because there's a lot of things that used to come to my mind until I got this epiphany literally last night. Y'all, I had a shower thought, woo, that's when you know I'm back because I be talking to myself in that shower. I know my family hate to see me come in because I'm just yappa yappa yappa, never stop talking. But this one I had to come out of the shower and write it down, even though I had to get up for work early the next day. But like I said, I'm learning to be obedient. When I feel like a vision comes to me, I'm just gonna write it down. I'm just gonna speak about it because, like Michael Jackson said, if I don't do it, it's gonna go to somebody else. It's not gonna go to Prince because they both dead. Sorry. 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 Let me get to the topic at hand. I've asked you, what do you see when you think of somebody who has religious psychosis? I'm going to tell you what I used to see. When most people think about religious psychosis, including myself, they think of someone who has alleged visions and dreams and claims that they are speaking to the higher power, or that they are the higher power, or that they are the second coming of a higher power. And for the most part, online, we see a lot of, think pieces and half baked takes that we associate with religious psychosis, like people saying, oh, getting braids in as a black woman is the devil trying to keep you in slavery, or Kanye West saying that, slavery was a good thing. Please correct me, I don't know if he said exactly that, or something about like the Jews deserving the Holocaust. I don't know, but it was all under the guise that he had an enlightenment and needed to tell the world about it. And so when we see these ridiculed, comicalized, I'm not sure if that's the word, but when we see the commodification, please, I beg. I don't get a dictionary beside me, so I'm just gonna go off the dome. But when we look at how people's mental illnesses and unfortunately the heinous statements that come out of them are portrayed and conveyed to the internet, we have no choice but to internalize the negative traits behind religious psychosis, and we immediately associate it to a person who's crazy, a person who thinks that they're better than everyone, a person who is stupid, a person who is lost. And this is what we call stigma. We all hear this word stigma, we hear stigmatization, we hear generalization, we hear these words mostly in therapized conversations, and they're thrown around on the internet without really knowing their origin. And that's kind of what I want to break down today, because what I realized upon my study of religious psychosis and psychosis as a whole is that we are in the trenches of a deep, deep stigma that is yet to be dismantled, and it's causing more harm than good because we are unable to decipher and discern psychosis that is a cry for help and a person who is simply arrogant and spewing BS. And that's hard to do on the internet because everything is controversy, everything is conversation, and everything is a think piece. But when can we pinpoint where a person actually needs to be reached out to and saved? Even in your own personal life. We're not just talking about the glorified, glamorized stories online. But let's get into what I wrote down in this journal of mine today. Just to preface, I'm going to be speaking from an agnostic lens with reference to the Bible. I have my handy little journal here with me, guys. You can hear it in the mic. You can hear her. I am going to read little bits and pieces from it, not necessarily excerpts, but I'm just looking down at it to jog my memory, so ignore me. But religious psychosis and the origin of this hard-rooted stigma is something that I really wanted to cover because it's something that I think I experienced. I'm not too sure. I was never diagnosed, right? But I think back to my agnostic years, mainly my entire teens, and I think about maybe age of 16 to maybe 18, I would have bouts every couple of months where I was feeling lonely. I would feel like I was lacking community. I feel like I needed to belong to something, some sort of community. And the only community that I was actually in, because, never left my house, homebody, was my church. I went to church every Sunday. I wasn't really in with the main group of friends in that church. I had my own personal friends, but, I was looking at them and their lives looked so fulfilled and satisfactory. And I was like, maybe that's what's missing in my own life. Maybe I need to do this so that I don't go to hell. So I would just find random Bible quotes and just spam post them on my story. And then I would have debates with people on things that I did not know about, but I was just convinced that God told me to have these conversations with people. I don't even want to delve into the things I was debating because frankly, I don't remember, hence why I think, something was not going on well up there. But point aside, I really think what got me out of that and what snapped me out of my psychosis was just going full-blown atheist. From the age of 18, 19, maybe 20, didn't believe in anything at all. And that's what kind of shook me out of it, because I was like, wait, what am I doing? Why am I out here saying all these things and having these debates with people? They don't even have any meaning. Why am I trying so hard to not go to hell? Hell doesn't even exist. That doesn't even make sense. Forget this. I'm out. So I really just tapped out, and that was my way of, snapping out of whatever that was at that time. Was I definitely don't think it was exploring my faith. Never once did I touch the Bible in that time frame. So after a period of time, like I said in the last episode, it was around 2024, end of 2024, early 2025, that I rediscovered my love for God and my connection with God. And I've been slowly building and developing in that. In the eyes of someone who is formerly agnostic and someone who is highly skeptical and a serial nihilist, and someone who would adopt elements of stoicism as well in my personal life, I think that contradicts a lot with the way modern day faith works in the Christian community. And even then, even after dismantling the systems that didn't make sense in my head and deconstructing religion for myself and finding a way to love and develop my faith, I still fall short in the sense that I join in on the half-baked, surface level, not fully thought through skepticism towards anybody who says anything heinous under the name or under the guise of religion. It's very easy to throw around the words, oh, they must just have religious psychosis. Oh, are you okay in the head? When someone says something dumb on the internet, Kanye West, so many other people, Andrew Tate, whatever, when they use God's name in vain, when Donald Trump holds the Bible upside down in front of a church, I'm like, oh, all these people who are falling for this, they're under religious psychosis. But was that just me throwing a word around, or was that me, along with many other people, weaponizing a stigma that has actually been set up for our detriment? And when I say our, I mean the Black community. Yes, I'm bringing race into it. Oh, brother. Oh my gosh. Pretends to be shocked. Keziah bringing up race. Who's surprised? Hands up. No hands? Yeah, that's what I thought. We're going to get to that in a second though. But before that, let me open up a Bible quote that also came to me in the shower, because wildly contradictory, but I feel like God gave me this one to say to you guys. And the reason I think he said it is because I was just talking to myself, and I'd like in the shower, like and this and this and that. And, oh, and Isaiah 42 verse 3. Please, I've never read Isaiah in my life. I'm slowly creeping my way through the Bible, but Isaiah I did not touch. So I don't even know how many chapters are in this book, right? But I was like, you know what? Sure, we'll have a look. I had a look, guys. Let me read what it says. Okay, for context, Isaiah chapter 42. It's in the Old Testament, and here, God is outlining his promise concerning his servant or his people through Old Testament law, kind of like stating his standards for his people and what he expects of them to do in this life, right? Let me read what it says. Behold, my servant, whom I uphold. A bruised reed he will not break, and a dimly burning wick he will not extinguish. He will faithfully bring forth justice. Does that not ring a bell, and does that not relate to the topic at hand? Because my Bible is a study Bible, so it gives additional context at the bottom. What it says for this is, the servant will bring comfort and encouragement to the weak and oppressed, which is the exact opposite of what I have been doing by throwing around the term religious psychosis, and what a lot of you may also be doing. Why? Well, we're going to find out. Okay, so in my journal I say, I really want to delve into what hyper-religious psychosis really entails and the dangers of stigmatizing people like that, and loosely throwing that word around whenever a controversial point happens to be leaving a religious person's mouth. To discern between a heinous person, a psychotic person, and a genuinely barbaric and evil person will save you from religious prejudice or falling into false doctrines, or even help you pick your battles if someone's statements resemble a cry for help. So I spoke about the word stigma at the start, our little keyword for today. I think the analogy that came to me again in the shower. Guys, a lot happens in that shower, okay? Pause. Play. A lot happens in the shower in terms of my thoughts, right? I was thinking about an analogy that related to stigma. So, you know, when you make a pot of chicken stock, hear me out. When you make a pot of broth, the fat globules coagulate, they rise to the top, they cool, and they form a hard gelatinous layer over the actual broth itself. So you've got two layers, right? Hear me. Oh, this sounds so stupid, but hear me out. Let me cook. When you look at that thick layer at the top, in order to get to the broth at the bottom, you need to scoop that fat layer off. It's not going to come off just by pouring some cold water on it. It's not going to come off by stirring it with a spoon. You cannot move and enter the truth of a topic or the truth behind a stigma unless you dig deep into it and uncover it manually. You need to actively search and question the structures that have been set up by society to structure how we live and how we perceive people. And with stigma, when you have a mixture of prejudice, false truths, false doctrines, minimizing of emotions, mixing a little bit of racial prejudice in there, you need to dismantle all of that to get to the truth, the broth, the brothiness of it all. I'll read it verbatim what I said in my journal. Stigma is deep-rooted. Imagine hot oil in an ice-cold bucket. When it coagulates and floats to the top, it forms a hard surface, like homemade chicken stock, where you either have to scoop the fat layer off or pour in hot water to dissolve the fat when washing it. Without clearing that fat layer, the manipulated stereotypes, the surface-level characterizations, and the ignorance that builds stigma will prevent you from accessing the uncovered story, the truth. We are going to uncover the truth about religious psychosis today. Let's talk about the definition of stigma itself, because that's my own personal analogy. But guys, I'm a scientist through and through. You know, I had to pull up PubMed. So I'll give you my sources and I will show you what I found. So by definition, Stigma originally comes from the Greek word, which is stizine. Correct me if I'm wrong in that pronunciation. I definitely am. But a stizine was basically a mark that was put on slaves' cloths or their bodies during that time to distinguish them in the streets when they're out in public, that regular people will see them as lesser than, as plebeians, as poor people, as people not to be respected, people not to be considered, people not to be prioritized, right? Stigma is just the modern derivative of a stizine, where it's not a physical mark, but it's a psychological mark, and it's a societal mark that is upheld based on how rigid that society is. And Arboleda Flores in 2002 realized that stigma is built on two fundamental elements. One, the recognition of that mark or that sign that makes you, stigmatized. And two, other people outside of your group using that sign to devalue you. So it's a two-pronged approach. Not only does the stigma exist, but the stigma cannot be upheld if it is not acknowledged as something to make you devalued and lesser than. So when we relate this back to religious psychosis would not have even been a stigma if it was not something that was devalued. We can acknowledge that people go through mental health issues and mental health concerns without deeming them as lesser than or lower value or lower class humans. And the majority of the stigmas that exist in our world are often from the second fundamental pillar of stigma, the actual active devaluation and the acknowledgement that you are less than me because I've noticed this in you and I deem it as wrong. So let's get into the religious side of it all. Might I also remind you that psychosis isn't even a mental illness itself. It's just a condition. It's a symptom that people undergo, which again is not known because it's overshadowed by the stigma of psychotic, crazy, loopy, deranged, right? Arboleda also defines psychosis for us as loss of contact with reality, usually through two things: hallucination, seeing or hearing things, and delusion, believing things that are not true, but you hold them as your fundamental dogma and truth. So those two things combined is what creates a psychotic person or someone who is experiencing psychosis. Because again, language is very important here. Calling someone a psychotic person, touchy topic, touchy one. You say it's a person with psychosis, same way you don't just straight up call someone autistic. You say it's a person with autism because it's not their entire being. It's a symptom that they experience. Religious psychosis is where religious content dominates. So if we take the hallucination aspect of it, it would be a prophet saying something in your ear, or saying that you hear the angels calling you, or, that God is sending you to do this and that. Or you could say that, you went to heaven and you came back because God gave you divine instructions on how to make the world a better place, which we know outside of your bubble that did not happen. But because you believe it's true, it is a delusion. So hallucination plus delusion equals psychosis. That is where religious psychosis comes from. I didn't know this until I read it. So this is where the question lies, right? And this is where I had to really reckon with myself and convict myself. Why are we so quick, especially in Gen Z and the younger millennials, why are we so quick to to comfort and protect people experiencing mental health issues, and we're so quick to, advocate on their behalf when their feelings are being minimized and disregarded, and we're so quick to jump on our parents when they say something stereotypical or they uphold a stigma about depression or anxiety or something like that. Why are we so quick to defend that? But when it comes to religious psychosis, it's, oh, you crazy. Okay, bet. Is it the fact that it's intertwined with religion? Does the religion aspect minimize the intensity of the psychosis? Is the psychosis not deemed as legitimate because religion is also, to many people, not considered legitimate? Do people, kind of misconstrue an actual mental illness with somebody's religious belief? Do they think that people who are religious all are experiencing psychosis and all religious people must be some kind of crazy? These are questions that need to be asked. And I needed to ask myself, because I wonder if there's a superiority complex coming from someone who has deconstructed religion, myself, and is able to look at everything from a discerned point of view and be able to take what applies and leave what doesn't. I'm able to look at maybe some of my relatives back home who are rolling on the floor, kissing pastors' feet, and being like, you must be mad. Like, this is why our people are never free. I be saying things like that as well. This is why our people are never free. Like, everyone is just going through psychosis, doing up psychosis. Is everyone going through psychosis? Let me read what I said in my journal. Okay. Oh, by the way, the definition of religious psychosis came from AM/FM Healthcare, and it was sourced from 2025. But this is what I said. Why are we so quick to villainize people like this and not other mental health conditions? Is it because it's associated with Black people the most, who historically are not respected in mental illness and are often ridiculed, sometimes rightfully so, for their far-fetched, habit-led relationship with God, quote unquote, and falling for pastors' prosperity tactics? That's another aspect that I wanted to touch on, because yes, it could come from the fact that religion is not respected, but a lot of times on the internet, the discourse surrounding religious psychosis is centered on Black people. Every time you see some sort of culty madness going on, or like I said in the beginning, Kanye West saying some things, people saying that braids are a disease, and people saying that wigs are demonic, like you start to scratch your head a little bit. And I'm sure from the outside looking in, people are already not respecting Black people's religious beliefs. They're not respecting Black people's mental illness as it is. So when we combine the two and we sit in the center of that Venn diagram, where's the respect? And how is that respect being commanded and demanded? Is it being demanded? Does the respect even feel expected? Are we upholding that respect for ourselves? No, we're not. And I can hold my hands up, both my hands up, and say that I am a perpetrator of this stigma. I am responsible wholeheartedly for maintaining and upholding a system that is already against a lot of us. And I actually found another study on this by Schofield et al. 2019, where they had 4 groups of 35 adults from African and Caribbean descent in the UK, I think in Lewisham, I'm pretty sure, and they basically just sent them onto like little chat groups. Like, I don't know if you guys know Jubilee, the YouTube channel, who, do those controversial questioning kind of, interviews. The questions were semi-structured so that it didn't seem like they were framed or overly manipulated, but they just had conversations with these people, and they were gathering data on the origin of the stigma surrounding psychosis, not particularly religious psychosis now. I couldn't really find a paper on that. It's kind of hard to find objective information on something like that. But I'll show you what the results of this study found. Black, African, and Caribbean communities have elevated risk of psychosis of varying origins under 4 key pillars. And I'll run through these pillars. So the first reason that there's a higher level of psychosis in these communities is the accumulation of stressors due to disadvantaged minority status. This includes poverty, isolation, asylum seeking, and a desperation for control. Do you know what I mean? Like, think about our parents or our parents' parents when they first entered the countries that we live in. That's if you're living outside of your native country. I think about, all the things my parents had to endure. Like, my dad is a very smart man, very educated man. He came to this country a very educated man, and he had to work as a kitchen porter. And that's just part of, life. That's just a part of, your coming up story. But you can't sit here and say that wouldn't drive you insane, wouldn't drive you up the wall. And like I said, psychosis isn't a born mental illness. It's a condition with symptoms that are triggered by your external environment. So I understand this one. Let's look at the second pillar. The second one is inequitable experiences in mental health services. Ding, ding, ding. This is where the religious psychosis conversation comes into play. There are many false positive diagnoses of psychosis in the Black community. Why is that? Angry Black woman, a big Black, bold Black man. Think of these images that have been perpetrated in the minds of our society and subconsciously in the minds of our caregivers, of the people we pay taxes to take care of us. And time and time again, our conditions are minimalized, not just physically, like we see in many Black women who experience death, a miscarriage, in pregnancy issues in the hospitals. We also see it in mental health. Black people are not diagnosed enough with depression and anxiety. They're often diagnosed with psychosis because, like what we often do when we see a person chatting rubbish on the internet and it happens to be of a religious theme, we instantly throw the word, oh, psychosis, you're crazy, cool, bad. Low-key, the doctors are doing the same thing to us. And I'm not saying that that's our fault. I don't think it's our fault. It's definitely not our fault. But why are we also perpetrating it? When the false positive diagnoses are set and a Black person comes in, saying that they're hearing premonitions or they're hearing things, one of the patients that was questioned in this study said that they were told that, oh, so you're hearing things, okay, so psychotic ideations, cool. Like, they remember that the psychiatrist was literally writing these things down, and this grew frustration in them, and frustration from being pigeonholed and backed into a corner that you didn't even ask to be put in often then just adds fuel to the fire, because then you're labeled as an angry Black woman, you're labeled as a frustrated, easily agitated Black person, and your anger is misconstrued as craziness, which further adds to the false stereotype that they are using to diagnose Black people with psychosis. So that's one of the second pillars of psychosis and why it's overly diagnosed in our community. Let's get to the third one. Okay, the third one is absence of community support. This one is pretty straightforward, pretty self-explanatory. I won't delve deeply into it. It literally just means that there is no close direct family with these people in these countries. Immigration means that you're coming to this country alone, and so no family care, no family help. The only help you'll have is from the Good Samaritans around you who will actually go out of their way to take care of you and to support you. If you don't have that, you have no one. You are literally on your own. And I think a lot of us older Gen Z and younger millennials who are moving to different countries for the first time can kind of get a sense of that, where you're in a brand new country and you can't just go to your mum and say, I need a cup of tea. Someone's not there to make your breakfast for you. Someone's not there to give you a massage when you have a backache. You're literally doing everything on your own. So imagine how the older generation must have felt going through certain mental illnesses and not having the stability of familial support. That must be very difficult. But the fourth pillar of the elevated risk of psychosis may be the most important of all, because I've said it like 50 million times, and that is double-pronged stigmatization. Yes, my theory actually aligns with the research. This is still from Schofield's study of Afro-Caribbean psychosis, but his double-pronged stigmatization is labeled as external discrimination and inconsideration, which we've spoken about in the medical department, but also an internal stigma from the community itself. Are we hearing this, people? The community itself. Our ability to internalize stigmas that we didn't even set up, to internalize structures instead of dismantling them, instead of questioning the origin of a stigma, we feed into it and succumb to it, and instead we are perpetrating illness, difficulty, and constraint on our own people because we are unable to understand that mental health is a multifaceted discussion that is not being brought up enough. When's the last time you spoke to maybe your parent or something about mental illness, and what will they say? Oh, when I was in Cameroon, when I was in Africa, I never had no mental health. That only came up during the pandemic. That's what my parents be saying, bro. Yeah, this mental health thing, we never heard about that until the pandemic. A statement like that, a blanket statement like that without the contextualized study, it's what leads people to not speak out about their problems. And on top of that, outside of speaking out on our problems, we're unable to speak out for other people. We're not able to delegate ourselves to helping people in our own lives, or even helping people in our community to get diagnoses or get out of their psychosis. And that sounds like a crazy thing to say. Like, what do you mean, Keziah? Like, I'm not no martyr. Like, I'm not gonna go put myself in harm's way just because a person's crazy. They can be crazy all by themselves. Okay, that's fine. You can do that. But our inability to do that and our inability to confront these issues is what leads Black people to their graves every year, to cults, to losing an excessive amount of money, to debt related suicide. There is a lot of layers to this psychosis conversation that we're not delving into far enough, and we're not seeing past the consequences of brushing all these things under the rug, right? Last year, even me last year, like I'll read what I said in my journal. Even me last year would have been clamoring onto the opportunity to shun and discuss and nitpick how crazy psychosis can be. How dumb must you be to fall for this cult? Oh, shush, you're clearly in psychosis. These are things that I've said before when rebuttaling stupid religious topics. But why do we never discuss how or why it's happening? Because at the root of a surface level joke, some people are losing their minds and even their lives to cultism. It is often more than a lack of discernment when it comes to religious psychosis. It's often a trauma response. And I inserted the name Ruby Lana because anyone who was on TikTok around the end of the pandemic will know about this girl, Ruby Lana. I used to follow her because, alt girly, like, she used to post really cool makeup and really cool hair. And then all of a sudden, she was finding God. She found her way to Jesus. And we love that for her. But then, her aesthetic changed a lot, and then she started talking to this guy online who said that she's the chosen one and that she's this amazing person and he needs to visit her. And next thing you know, this girl went missing online and in real life. So they were literally cry outs and like search calls online for this girl, like, where's Ruby, bring her back. And after several months, I don't remember how long it was, but she got back onto the internet and said, yeah, I was a part of a cult and nobody saved me, nobody told me nothing, nobody helped me. Because a lot of people get on their high horse, including myself, and will be like, fine, okay, you want to be all this high and mighty and religious, that's fine. Like, you think you're better than me because you're doing all this and you stopped being alt and you're wearing all these plain clothes, fine, do your thing. But doing their thing is what leads them to their graves, because it's a miracle that she even made it out. There's several other names that I could list that I've not listed that left home and never came back, because instead of humbling ourselves, like it says in Isaiah 42 verse 3, a bruised reed he will not break. A bruised reed, a plant like that, that's already bruised and broken, you don't need to go step on it even more. You don't need to kick someone when they're down. You can clearly see that somebody is in deep distress and needs deep help, needs severe intervention, and your first thing to do is shun them, like, okay, bet, you want to do that? Cool, bye. I'm not involved. I even know a person in my personal life who I know for a fact is going through religious psychosis. I know for 100% fact. And I would just talk about him with my brother. I always wonder like how he's doing now. I think he's okay now, but like I look back at certain things that he used to do and like the places I used to find him and the people I used to see him with when I was, going around Dublin and, living my life. I would see him and be like, what is he doing here? Why is he there? Why is he not at home? Where are his parents? What's going on? I won't get into the details of somebody's personal life, but I just know that there are several instances that I could have put my humility in gear and put my pride aside and questioned the origin of what was happening to someone, and not just assuming that they're on a high horse. Because if anyone's on the high horse, it's you and me, for thinking that we're above helping somebody, especially when you have a moral compass, and especially when you have a moral compass that's rooted in the same or similar religion that is being perpetrated against the person who's in need of help. Do you get what I mean? A bruised reed he will not break, and a dimly burning wick he will not extinguish. It's the same concept. Think of a candle. I'm gonna pick up a candle. See this candle? I've still not used it. My candles are collecting dust. I'm more of a winter candle kind of girl. But think of like when your candle is just about to die, instead of just opening it up and letting it get the oxygen it needs to, reburn. I can't remember the word. You just blow it out, or you cover it and let it die out completely. That's what you're doing, and that's what a lot of us are doing when we are not correctly dismantling the origin of stereotypes and stigmas that have been perpetrated against us. And it's something that really needs to be addressed in the Black community, in the religious community, in the agnostic community, dare I say, in the atheist community. A lot of us could put our differences aside and be able to discern when somebody is actually crying out for help. Because it doesn't matter where the help is coming from. Help is needed. Help is needed in a lot of people on the internet and also in our daily lives. I think the government and the powers that be have done a wonderful job at getting all of us on the bottom tier to fight each other instead of punching upwards or punching to the left and punching to the right when we are in fact all the same. We all bleed the same, don't we? Just some people are going through a little bit more than others. I'll continue to read. Like the oil and water analogy from earlier, you really have to scoop the upper layer off this conversation and understand that our community is already disregarded enough. Before you cut that hyper-religious friend off, quote unquote, start delving deeper. Ask them questions about why they are like that. Query their family. Go to church with them someday. If safe. If it is safe. If it is safe, don't go to some cult and come back and be like, Keziah told me to give you that. Keziah told you nothing. Keziah told you nothing. I just need to disclaim that because, please, I'm not trying to get caught lacking. And neither should you. Be safe. But be curious. Anyway, now that we've uncovered the root of stigma, the definition of religious psychosis, where it comes from, how it impacts the communities that I've mentioned, it's only right to round this conversation off with a solution. How do we tackle this and how do we combat this situation? By understanding and taking, the information that we learned from earlier and basically putting it in reverse. Like I said earlier, stigma and the origin of it, it's two fundamental beliefs and it's two fundamental stages. One, the acknowledgement of the mark against the person, and two, using the mark to devalue that person. All you need to do is take that in reverse. Take the mark that exists instead of devaluing that person based on that stereotype. Understand that you both are equal and equalize yourself to that person. Look at them as exactly what they are, a person, a human being. Going through something? Yeah. Chatting rubbish? Yeah. But a human nonetheless. And when we humanize people like that and acknowledge that psychosis, mental illness are just parts of people and they are not their whole identity, we are able to holistically draw nearer to them and understand if they need help or if you need to get a helpline, right? Or if you just need to cut them off entirely, because some people are actually just dickheads. And that's okay. That's actually okay. I'm not telling you to go out there and be a martyr and risk your own peace of mind to save somebody who doesn't want to be saved and is just hell-bent on being a terrible human being. But 9 times out of 10, the terrible human beings aren't having as hard of a time as we may think. And therefore, I cannot sit here and say that people who say heinous things for the sake of God or in God's name are going through religious psychosis, because they are not. They are living great lives. They are rich. They have status. They are unshaken, undisturbed, unmovable. And then I'll read from my journal here because this part links in. If anything, the truest survivors of psychosis are your friends with unaddressed church hurt, your cousin back home in Africa or the Caribbean who is a teen mum by rite of passage with nothing else to turn to, the loner turned youth pastor who regurgitated whatever he could to finally gain community, even at the expense of his own peace and skepticism. Once again, the elite have turned us to point fingers at each other from the bottom floor. Instead of that energy addressing super pastors, private jet, mysterious income, we spend months attacking and judging fellow laymen that need support or a reality check. We could all be doing so much better. And that concludes my discussion on religious psychosis. Wow, that was actually really fun. I enjoyed that. To think that all came from the shower. Thank you, shower. Yuck. Ew. I cringe myself out so much, and it's probably a sign that I need to go. Y'all, I need to lock in. The gym closes in an hour and a half, but like summer's coming. Summer is coming. I need to lock in. Well, I've already been locked in, but like final stretch, final stretch. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening to my discussion on religious psychosis. I really hope you learned something new today. I certainly learned a lot from doing that research, and it made me realize I really miss research, Like, I love being a scientist, don't get me wrong, but I didn't love it for the science. I loved it for the research. I love PubMed. I highly recommend, if you have any questions about anything, bin ChatGPT. PubMed is right there. It's basically like Google of scholars. Wait, Google Scholar is a thing, and that's basically PubMed. Anyway, I love PubMed. I love PubMed, and PubMed loves me because what a beautiful analysis that was. I hope you all learned a little thing or two. Maybe you can use your new knowledge on the origin of stigmas to be able to catch prejudice right in the moment live. You can be like, uh-oh, that's coming from a place that isn't true. You'll know how to stand up for yourself better. You'll know how to advocate for people around you. And hopefully you'll be able to discern what actually requires your attention and what doesn't, and be able to delegate certain people's burdens and trauma to the resources that are better fitting to help them without draining your own mental, emotional, and spiritual battery, because you can't fill up people from an empty cup at the end of the day. But thank you so much for listening, guys. Episode 2, that's lit. Oh my goodness, I'm excited for the episode 3. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about, but maybe when I shower this evening, I'll know. Maybe I'll know in the shower. Thank you so much, guys, for listening to episode 2 of the Friend in the Room podcast. I have been your host, Keziah, as always, and I will catch you in the next episode, okay? Bye.